as we get into the second hour of this conversation today. So we're getting into an irrigation conversation, one that's been heavy on the minds of very many people for the longest time. One would wonder, why are we talking about that when it is raining, flooding? Well, it never does stop. The Principal Secretary in the State Department for Irrigation in the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation is our guest this hour. Our guest host this morning is Mark Bichachi, just pushing conversations with us as we continue this morning. All right. CPA Ifantas Kimotho is the Permanent Secretary in the State Department and is here with us this morning. PS, good morning.
Morning.
Karibu sana.
Today.
Well, thank you for being here. Many conversations that we'll have, and as we wrap around that today, Principal Secretary, as we wrap around that today, we will get into our proverb. CT goes around the continent and picks up proverbs from different countries. This week he is in he's in the Republic of Congo.
Yes. Not to be confused with the Democratic Republic of Congo, otherwise known as DRC. This is Congo Brazzaville. Yes, to distinguish the two. Just like you have Sudan, Southern Sudan, and you have Sudan Khartoum, so you know which Sudan you're speaking of. The proverb: a boat of pity will never cross the water.
PS, what do you think about this?
Thanks for that. But I'm not very good in proverbs, but I'll give it a try.
Thank you.
It means you can't make it if you're not confident of yourself.
You've explained it well and simple.
Yep.
Yes. Because when someone wallows in pity, what does it tell you about them? Something has happened, yes. You could move along, but you've decided to stay in one spot pitying yourself. There's no movement there. Yes.
Indeed. Okay, well, moving on a boat of water, moving along water issues, irrigation, rights in front of center, rights, in the middle of that. Let's start off with understanding what this particular department is meant to do. What is the mandate of your department, even as we look at irrigation and delivering for this country?
Yeah, thank you for that. Maybe I'll start by just saying why the particular mandate, just before I dive into the mandate. As you all know, we've had a lot of effects of climate change because of climate change, and that has affected the rain-fed agriculture. So it's no longer sustainable. And as a result of that, irrigation now becomes the way forward to actually look into matters food security. Coming back to the mandate, our mandate as a State Department of Irrigation is to increase the area under irrigation. Currently, using just the normal runway, surface water, we have a potential of irrigating around 1.9 million acres. But using the dams, we have a potential of irrigating 3 million. So our mandate actually is to increase the area under irrigation. We have a target of putting, currently the area under irrigation is 694,000. We have a target of increasing that to 1.2 million acres. So that's the first mandate. The second mandate is actually to impound water, store water, harvest and store water for the same purpose of irrigation. Irrigation is a big consumer of water. Actually, in any particular dam, you find irrigation consumes around 87% of the water. So for us to have sustainable agriculture, we need to dam water and store water. So that's our second mandate. The third mandate is actually to do production, particularly on rice. We recognize at least almost 90% of the rice that we consume is actually under irrigated, mostly from our schemes. So I'll say the main mandate of the State Department is those three that I've just mentioned.
Okay. Now, how do we see that this is playing a role specifically? And if you look around the country, and a lot of rain-fed agriculture is what has been dependent on, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
How do we see that irrigation from a policy point of view and also then implementation will then ensure that agriculture, no matter what, we're talking about whether there is rain or not, whether there are lower levels of rain or not, that agriculture then will continue to receive what it needs to be able to now give yields in the country. What would be needed for that to happen?
For us to continue in production, the main thing, despite the drought and everything, we need to be a little bit resilient. And to be resilient, what we need to do, we need to invest a lot in storage. Like now when it's raining, we've done quite a number of water pans, which will be very helpful 6 months after the rains. Remember also sometimes 2 years ago, we suffered some droughts and we lost a lot of livestock. To avert such things, that's why we find the issue of coming up with water pans, fodder, and the likes. That's what actually will actually save. So, and that is actually done through irrigation. Yeah.
Well, P.S., you talked about increasing the amount of land that is under irrigation from around 700,000 to 1.2 million. In how long is this supposed to happen? And also, in which areas? Because I'm quite curious about how we are reclaiming the northern parts of our country, because there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, yeah. So we intend to do that by 2027. This year alone, let's say not this year, last year alone, we were able to put an additional 47,933 acres under irrigation. This particular year, our target is to actually put 60,000 under irrigation. And so far, as we talk, 2 weeks ago, we had Loanzoia, which cuts across Busia and Siaya, water flowing. It has been a project that has been there from 2018. So that alone will give us 10,000. This year alone also, early in the year, we commissioned His Excellency the President commissioned Murumoja in Meru, which is around 500 acres. Earlier we had done Kaigonji, 1,500. In short, the community projects we've done so far, we've done over 5,000 acres. Then the Loanzoia. So far, I can say we're on track because we already have 15,000 acres, which has already been put under irrigation.
In every time I talk to someone in government, and whichever docket they're in, and we ask them what it is the government has done, I'm really fascinated at just how much gets done, and yet we have absolutely no idea that it's being done. Well, it's a story that we in the media keep saying, why doesn't the government talk more about what it is doing so that people actually know? But let me ask this question. When you talk about surface water being sufficient to achieve a certain amount of progress, the question I ask is, have we actually set in motion processes that would optimize water? Like now, there's so much water, they say water everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
Do we have a process, a plan, a strategy that when we have an abundance of water like now, yes, you have water pans, you have some dams, I'd just like to know what the plan is, what the strategy is, and how it is we plan to increase all such facilities so that when we have rain like this, as you say correctly, forget 6 months, 8 months down the line, we'll still be benefiting from it. So that when we have the next cycle of rain, it actually finds that we don't go into that period like the 3-year drought period that we went through.
Okay. So actually, you're right. We actually in the process of mapping up the country, and we are coming with an irrigation master plan for each basin, and that will determine the method of water security you're going to use. An example in the northern eastern, where we may not have quite a number of rivers, but when it rains, we have a lot of laggers. During the last season of the El Nino, we were able to, actually we received the highest amount of water in some of the areas. Like in Tana River, the gauge that is in Garissa was actually at 7 gauge, meaning the river flow was actually 7 meters from the ground up. It was the highest ever since independence. So, but along there, we were actually able to, there's what is called laggers. Laggers, this is where you have, when rain flows, when it rains, after the rain, there's a lot of water that flows. That's what we normally call laggers.
Yeah.
The laggers, we have like 63 laggers, very huge laggers. these are like huge rivers, temporary rivers. We have like 63 of them. So during El Nino, what we did, we actually mapped up 63 of them, which has a potential of impounding 480 million liters. So with that, what we've done, in each and every ward or where there is a lager, we actually have mapped out an area. Now, after knowing the amount of water, we've gone another step now further and map out where we can do a potential water pan. And this time round, we are doing very huge water pans which are going to be 750,000 cubic, as opposed to before when we were doing small water pans of around 100,000 cubic, which will only sustain you for around 3-4 months. But now the 1 million cubic water, actually they're like small dams. Those ones can sustain you for a period of almost 1 year. And over and above that, what you're doing, you're also identifying an area, because in those northern eastern areas, you have a lot of piece of land. You're identifying an area whereby you can do fodder, irrigated fodder. So that, with irrigated fodder and the storage, that will enhance and the issue of drought going forward. So that's now on the northern part of it. On other areas where we have, where I said where we have service flow, that's where now we are focusing more on irrigation. Places like what I just said, Luanzoia, we have a lot of water flowing before we tap it before it gets to Lake Victoria. Then when we talk about Mombasa, we have Moache Dam, which will be complete in the next 2 years. Moache Dam actually will help us impound over 124 million cubic liters. So we'll be tapping water just before it gets to Indian Ocean. Moache Dam is in Kwale County. So those are some of the plans that are there. We also have Uma Dam in Kitui. Those are the dams which are now ongoing. Like Moache Dam should be complete by 2026. It's already ongoing. Then we have Soinkor in West Pokot. We have Soimurunyi in West Pokot. So those are some of the plans which are there.
Okay. So are we saying essentially that with these plans in place, or let's even look at before the plans, that there would be policy whereby it goes towards implementation, whereby around the country, places whereby we would depend on to be able to deliver produce in terms of agriculture, that can actually be water fed throughout the year as a result of these projects that are being put in place. So essentially what we're saying is that with these, there will not be a time whereby yields will suffer or crop will be low because of lack of water.
Yeah, actually, in essence, that's what you're saying. We are saying like even the northern eastern part, with those dams, we'll have consistent food security because of those plants. Like for example, also in Radat, we have a dam in Baringo. We have a dam called Radat, which will help us impound around 124 million cubic and help us put to production around 24,000 acres. When you go to a place like Turkana, again where we also have a huge challenge, we have a dam called Lowat Dam, which again will also help us impound around 324 million cubic. So with that, with the implementation of those dams, it's as you've rightly put it, we'll be able to sustainably and reduce our imports drastically in this particular country.
But P.S., I have a question. Talking about Western Kenya and Nyanza and the likes, the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has had issues with Egypt, and we know there's a treaty going back to the 1920s about Egypt and things like that. How are you handling that particular area, given that is still the breadbasket of Kenya?
Yeah, so I think when you talk about, I think the one you're talking about in Ethiopia had actually, that's a transboundary. It has an issue of transboundary, but the one for Western doesn't have those effects. Like the I've just talked about, Luanzoia. Luanzoia has a lot of flow that even at times it becomes a havoc. We have to use dikes to actually control. That's the same one that goes all the way to places like Budalangi. So with what we are doing, actually, we're even trying to control. We also, in the process, we're also doing flood mitigation and such like. At the same time, we are trying to stop a havoc. At the same time, we're also trying to create food security for the area.
But please talk a little bit about containing and averting the havoc. What is it that is done? For instance, what causes flooding? I know there's a lot of water from a layman's point of view, but is it something that can be averted? Is it something that can be contained?
Yeah, so flooding is an overflow.
Yes, it is an overflow.
Yeah, and that overflow, one way to manage it is through dikes. And the other way to manage it is through storage, which are some of the issues you're saying. Actually, you'll realize when you dam water, you actually control flooding. Because what you do when you come up with a dam, like for example, Tana River, which actually normally has a very huge impact whenever it rains. When we dam high ground fall, in essence, what we'll have control. High ground fall is 5.6 million cubic. When you dam it, you actually control the river flow. And actually, the other alternative of that, the advantage of damming is that also you prolong the period of the flow of water over time.
You know, there's if you fly towards Lamu during the rainy season, you are met with a very interesting spectacle. That is the Tana River, even as it weaves its way into the Indian Ocean, because you see this brown, sinewy snake-like movement. Okay. And then as you get towards the ocean, the place where now the river gets into the ocean, it's brown.
Right.
Okay. It's actually a bit puzzling to the mind before you realize, it's the river that has gone into. Now, how useful is dredging of rivers? And I'm going to explain to you why this concerns me. I come from the Kano Plains, okay, in Luo Nyanza. And there's a river called River Nyando. Songs have been sung about it. Yeah. Now, when it floods, water enters the house. As a child, I remember waking up to a floating sensation. It wasn't a floating sensation. We used to sleep on a reed mat. That was what we slept on, not a mattress. So when water entered, the reed mat, the bed, was actually floating. Yes, okay? So I'm simply saying, when you consider flooding, you're considering water that could have been put to use. And I want to understand what dredging then does and how useful it can be in situations like this to help augment the dam, the damming that you mentioned.
Yeah. So you're right. You're right. Some of the things that can be done is also to do is the activities to do upstream.
Yes.
So and those are some of the issues we're also looking at. You need to invest a lot in the upstream. Because when you invest a lot in the upstream, also we also reduce the siltation, which you find the guy is saying by the time water is getting to the ocean is brown water. It has carried a lot of soil erosion.
A lot of topsoil has been taken. Yes.
But if we invest a lot in conservation, that's why we have to work closely also with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, so to also invest in the upstream. Because for us, when you do irrigation, actually we are an abstractor. We are actually abstracting water. But for us to ensure the water is clean, we need, and also to avoid the soil erosion, we need to do a lot of land reclamation. That's why you find even in our department, you also have a small unit of land reclamation, which also works closely with the Environmental State Department and Environment State Department and Forestry to invest in the upstream part. A good example is at the river, whereby we now have Nairobi River Commission. Nairobi River Commission will also be working, because right now in the river we're tapping a lot of water, like Thwake, we're also tapping from it, but we find by the time water is getting to Thwake, it's not very clean. So but now when we invest in Nairobi River Commission, we'll be able to, some of those interventions, like now we intend to, under Nairobi River Commission, we are to do bamboo trees along, which actually are very good in cleaning and at the same time conservation. So there must be both efforts. We must have conservation efforts, consistent and focused conservation efforts along our rivers at the same time, and that also helps us also in recharging. Because the minute that also helps a lot in recharging, at the same time the cleaning of the water. So there must be concerted efforts, and that's why you have to have a one government approach when you're looking at all these things. Yeah.
Before we go to the break, I just want to ask, so the one government approach to, I just want to take the example of Nairobi River, for example. For as long as I can remember, Nairobi River has I don't even know that we can call it a river because it has so many other things in it apart from water. There have been many projects to see the cleaning of the river, for example. It flows into and flows out of many other tributaries and other streams that come in, and is a major source that then goes and connects with others, whereby we're saying that this can also be a form that can be used. How do we say that all of these things will come together if, like, one project, for example, for making sure the river is clean from end to end cannot happen? There's so many things. People are throwing garbage into the river. And it's very important when we still look at irrigation at the end of it, of what can happen. People are throwing garbage in. It's not maintained. It is... private organizations sometimes want to step in and see how they can work on it. Government has tried, but that has been a major source of water for many things. We just can't seem to get that and keep it tight. How do we then have this one approach if there seems to be a kink in this chain all the time?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the Nairobi River Commission, the docket is actually at His Excellency the Deputy President office, and why it was taken there is so that he can coordinate all the departments which are responsible. Like, for example, in the Nairobi River Commission, for us to make it clean, one, we have to deal with the issue of sewage. Sewage is actually under the State Department of Water and my counterpart colleague under State Department of Water and Sanitation. We have to deal with the issue of sewage because most of the houses which emit, they don't have a sewer system. So we have to deal with that sewer system, and also we also have to work closely with the county. So you find in that Nairobi River Commission, we have the State Department of Water, we have Nairobi County. Again, there are things we also have to deal with the industry, which actually normally dispose there. Then also we have to bring in NEMA. So all those respective agencies, they've now been brought in one table, and the mandate has been clearly cut out, the responsibility of each and every person. And after all that is done, we now have to bring the Department of Forestry, who are also responsible for the 15 billion. Part of the 15 billion is actually to plant. We have the Nairobi River Commission has a stretch of 900 kilometers. So part of it is actually to plant baboon trees and many other trees, which depending on the area along that river. And that's why I said now it will work because it is actually at a very high office. It's actually His Excellency the Deputy President who is in charge of that whole Nairobi River Commission.
So because it's at that level, it will work. Previously, it couldn't work because it was not at a high level of implementation in terms of who sat in the office.
And I think before, as I said, one government level approach, you find maybe if it's in environment, probably they may not have a very big oversight mandate over another department. But now when you're talking about it's in a high level, then everyone else responsible, be it the cabinet secretaries, be it the principal secretaries, they are all now reporting to a high office. So people somehow will be able to come with a better solution. So I believe that should actually happen. And I think we don't have an option in that because we are depending on the river for Thwake, which is about to be complete. We also depending on the river to do Galana Dam, which is actually one of the dams that we also expect to help us a lot in food production. We also have quite Mzima, so there are quite a number. So that at the river basin is a key concern for us to even when you're addressing the issue of food security.
Mark, going to you.
Nairobi City, Mombasa City, all these towns that have a lot of runoff. In fact, I have a pool city, I'll tell you. I have a swimming pool outside my house now. I need gumboots to visit.
Oh,
me.
That kind of swimming.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
I thought you were like of the top
pool.
tier.
No.
Okay.
It's not an Olympic stadium.
All right.
What are we doing about the water and the surface runoff that comes out of our cities? We talked about the pollution of the rivers and things like that. But as places like South B and the Expressway are flooding and water is running amok, what are we doing about the urban water situation?
We have the National Disaster Unit, which is actually currently working closely with the Nairobi County to handle that situation. That's the current solution that we are having at the moment. Yeah.
You know, the way you put it, it almost sounds like that unit is there to cause disasters.
if I were to jump, my goodness. But to jump on what Mark was saying, I think what Mark was asking, and stop me if I'm wrong, is there's all this runoff of water.
Yes.
And it seems to be wasted. What could actually be done with this excessive runoff of water that we have that can actually be, in what we see in other countries, piped, repurposed, as opposed to saying, well, this is what we're going to do to dredge the water.
Yeah.
But can this water actually be repurposed for use? Are there plans like that ever?
It's like now, the most of the water that is running, as I said, it finds its way in the Athi River Basin.
No, it finds its way outside Mark's house in a pool.
No. after proper drainage system, which is what part of what we are working on, it will find its way in the Athi Basin. Eventually, that's what will happen. And we have, as I said, downstream there in Kitui, we have the Thwake. And Thwake is going to help us dam over 600 million. But now the other issue, which is what we were talking about earlier, is how do we make sure by the time it gets into Thwake, it's equally clean. So here in Nairobi, the first issue is to make sure that our drainage system is working, which actually you find like how before we used to have very big challenges, but quite a number of that activities are already in place. Once you make sure the drainage system is working and that water flows and find its way all the way to the Athi, then downstream we've already at least taken advantage of the water by damming it.
So are we, PS, are we saying that the way drainage systems are designed, or at the very least imagined, is that water is going through the system, whether it's personal use in the home or commercial use, it goes into this drainage system, and the idea behind the system is that this water finds its way, it's purified, it's repurposed, and then goes and finds its way eventually in a dam. That's the way it's designed, and that this water then can be used later for other purposes, in this case irrigation, for example. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, we're saying with a good spatial plan, you see some of these issues, actually the key issue comes with the planning. With a good spatial plan, which is now some of the things that you're also looking at, we'll ensure that water actually flows to the respective places, so that eventually that water is actually used downstream after treatment, as you said. But I know when you get it dirty, also the cost of treatment becomes much more. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
So the plan is for that to happen. Right now, it's just whatever happens. Right now, it's just whatever water goes wherever it goes, that's what we deal with. But what I'm asking is that systems having been designed, are they designed so that this water leaves after it's been used, it is repurposed, it goes to the dam, so that that dam water is used for something else? Is that the way it is currently designed, or is it still a plan?
You see, the wastewater, I think there's the wastewater, but I think here first I was talking about the rainwater. The rainwater, well designed and well planned, it can be very useful. Not in Nairobi, because Nairobi you don't have a place for damming, but that water, well designed and well with all those mitigation factors, the same water can easily flow to the Athi Basin when it's clean. But it also has to be a coordination between the wastage. The wastage comes in on board, because at times you find even the wastage, if the wastage goes to the same river, then we'll end up with dirty water, which again, when it comes to treatment, we end up costing much more. So it's easier, it's cheaper to actually manage it and ensure you have clean water than to have the same water flow in when it's dirty. And for us to use it for consumption, we have to use a lot of money to treat it.
You know, listening to what you're saying, I have formed this understanding that we actually have enough water to help us run our business as a country.
That's true too.
But what puzzles me is, yes, there's a lot of water, and one hears of the plans, one even sees the implementation of the plans, but the outcomes that are supposed to be derived from these plans in the immediate medium term, long term. The people, for instance, in the county of Nairobi, because this is where we are, what is their part in all this? What are they supposed to do? Because there's a national government role, which we understand. What are they supposed to do? Because within the county, they also have a ministry whose function is almost a duplicate of what your function is. What do they do, and what does the national government do? We need to understand this so that when we now talk to the county of Nairobi, we can hold them to account and say, excuse me, this one is your docket.
Yeah, true. So it's true. As you said, you started by saying we actually have enough water. The issue is management. That's why when I started my conversation, I said the potential, even without damming, is 1.9 million acres, and we've not exhausted that. But after damming now is when we go to 3 million. So the damming of dams will help us add another 1.1 to make it 3 million. But coming back now to the last question, is you find we have, like now in irrigation in particular, when it comes to the county government, they are mandated to put irrigation from anything below 100 acres is within their mandate. These are the small streams which feed to a river. That's the mandate of the county government. Find the national government now handles anything between 100 to and above. For example, 100 to 1,000 is what we normally call community projects. Then you have the big schemes, which is between 1,000 to 3,000. Then anything over 3,000 requires for you to dam, because now the amount of water to be consumed will be much more. So that's a plan for in terms of irrigation between county and national government.
So when people encroach on what we refer to as riparian land, it interferes with all this process, doesn't it?
Yeah, that does.
Because now that we know is the mandate of the county. They're the ones who give authority for people to put up buildings and to do all this.
True. Yeah.
Now, would that also be a contributing factor to the flooding we see in city estates, where you find that there's an estate is actually flooded and the water is stagnant?
Yeah, so now, and that's why I said, like now, when I talk about a stretch of 900 kilometer, it's part of that. And I said, we in the Nairobi River Commission, one of their mandate is actually to make sure the issue of riparian runoff, then people who have encroached, they actually kicked out. You may find it's within the mandate of the county, but at times it goes beyond, and that's why now we've had to form a commission, and this commission has both the county and all the other implementing agencies. Like we have NEMA there on board, we have WARMA on board, and several other. And also, like now that one touches on Nairobi. The Nairobi River Commission touches on the Nairobi County. Nairobi County is part of it. We have Machakos County, which is part of it. Then we have Makueni, which is still part of it. So we have those three counties, which are all part and parcel of that. So the riparian now is one of the biggest contributors of that, because now in the riparian, those are the areas I was saying we're going to plant the bamboo. So even if it means demolishing along the riparian, because actually now that's where you're having the bigger effect. Those are some of the things that the Nairobi River Commission is supposed to do. They'll be making some very bold decisions, making sure if the people are built along the riparian, the houses are demolished and restoration activities are done.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to go back to this broader issue of damming, because we're essentially saying that 1 + 1 = 2. Well, hopefully. That in the case whereby you actually have dams completed around the country, that these will actually lead to a better state of irrigation, that year round, no matter what the rainfall will be, that you then have water that is available for people to use for agriculture, again being one of the markers upon which the economy is hinged, right?
Yeah, true.
And if we continue to say that, the speed at which these dams are being I wouldn't even say they're being completed, the speed at which progress is being made on these dams, and it's a bit worrying, isn't it? Because we are saying essentially that agriculture will depend on irrigation and not rain-fed agriculture anymore. That it will be irrigation in order to make sure that through the year you can have a yield. But we are not able to finish them or even progress on them at the speed at which would be required. Thwake Dam has been a story forever. I don't even want to talk about the other ones that were wrapped up in controversy. Are dams and water pans actually the best way to go when it comes to storage of water for irrigation? I ask this because we have very many examples of countries whereby water is stored underground. Water is stored and piped underground, and then that can be used for irrigation in the future. And sometimes overhead pipes are then created whereby there's an underground water storage, and then that's used for in an aerial manner to then provide water for irrigation. Would that be something that could actually be considered?
Okay. First, let me start with where you started, the issue of the dams and the speed at which they are being done. You recall His Excellency, the President, when he began the term, he talked about the 100 dams, and he said these 100 dams, we're actually going to look at them not from GOK funding, exchequer funding, or from a development partners perspective. We are going to do PPP. That is a public-private partnership.
Yes.
In essence, when you do public-private partnership, the speed at which the dams are being built is going to increase, because you're talking about a private person injecting the money. The role of the government there is actually to acquire the land and clear on the wayleaves. And that may not be a very substantial amount in the course of the dam. And some of the areas also where we're doing the dams, we already have government land, like in Galana. Galana, we already have, the government has 1.7 million acres. So we don't need to acquire any land. And there we've already gotten, and for irrigation dams, they are a bit unique in a way, in that for irrigation dams, you normally get two private partners. Like in Galana, we have a private partner who is doing the dam. Then on the other side, we also have a private partner who is actually doing production. So meaning already the dam become bankable, because when he builds it, we have someone who is ready to uptake on large-scale production. So the two now, you find, because dam for irrigation dam is actually an economic. Is actually meant for production. You find like now we have people who are willing to pay a water tariff of 7 cubic per liter. So an example, Galana Dam is going to be 300. The dam is going to impound around 350 million cubic. So if you multiply that by 7, that can tell you the amount of income the person doing the dam is likely to generate. So you find it becomes attractive. So that's what I'm saying. For irrigation, some of the irrigation dams are going to be built very fast. And we're also having conversation, like at the moment we're having conversation around 6 of them. There is Galana, which is already having we're just about to break ground. We should be breaking ground in July, because the private party has been doing studies on the dam, confirming the feasibility studies, confirming the financial model. So that we will be closing, and by July we should be able to get to the ground. And by June 2027 latest, we should be starting production. And they are talking about production of 200,000 acres is what they're going to put to production. So let's just take for example something like maize, because in Galana the person doing the large scale production has actually done some test run on 500 acres, and using irrigated agriculture, he's been able to produce 35 bags. The best we do in Kenya is around 25 per acre. He's doing 35 bags per acre per season, and is likely on a very ambitious level he can do 3 seasons. But because of soil health, we have to do an alternate crop. So you find he might do 2 crops. So that's around 70 bags per acre. So we're talking about 100,000. That will give you 7 million. So we're talking about 200,000, but he may not do 200,000 all of it on maize. So that's already bridges a very big deficit of maize by just that one dam. Talk about there is also high ground fall. High ground fall, that may take a little bit longer, maybe not maybe 5 years, but high ground fall itself, 5 to 6 years. Will help us put over 400,000 acres into production. Again, we already have a private party from UK. If you remember in COP 27 in November, His Excellency the President and the Prime Minister, that's when that deal was signed. They've been on the project development phase, and right now they're actually under evaluation. So very soon also they should be getting to a concessional agreement, and they start the process. It might take maybe 6 years, but at least after 6 years, you're talking about putting 400,000 acres into production. Part of that 100,000 acres is dedicated towards rice production, and that will also help us in damming and controlling the river flow and the floods of Tana River. which is actually where you normally have the biggest issues of flood mitigation. So again, you see there we are talking about not just we secure food. At the same time, you can imagine the number of jobs that will be created from that. You can imagine the issue of food security. So already Ghana and like that, when I say 100,000 acres put into production, and 1 acre normally gives you an average 2.8 tons of metric ton of rice. So that means you're talking about 280,000. So in 2 seasons, you're talking about 506,000. That already helps us reduce our deficit of rice in importation in Kenya. So then we have a dam like all those we're having conversations. We have Radat Dam already. There's a private party who right now Radat is under what we're calling evaluation. The two already have come to a completion. Ghana is way ahead, almost going to groundbreaking. High Grant, we're just about to get to the concession agreement. Radat, we are doing evaluation. So all this, what will happen, because it's private party, we're not using the government money, we can afford to have them run concurrently. So you can even have, at a go, we can have 10 dams running concurrently. It's just that right now we have to make sure that at this stage we conclude on all of them. Then we have Lowat Dam. Lowat Dam is in Turkana. It will help us. Lowat Dam has around 324 million cubic. It will help us put area under production around 37,000 acres. Lowat Dam will help us in terms of sugar. You know, we've been importing a lot of sugar, so that will help us a lot on that. And we are going to do this short-term sugar. You know, when you do irrigated sugar, you can do the one that has around 8 months, as opposed to this other one which normally takes 18 months. Then, so we have quite a number. So you see all those dams now taking on at the same time. And as I said earlier, you see these dams also helping us also in flood control. But the other methods, we also consider them. Like we have in Turkana, we have the aquifers, which we are also considering that. But the aquifer, the biggest challenge we've had is the salinity. But now we understand when you go down, like maybe a kilometer, we might be able to get some fresh water, which is now good for irrigation.
Quick question. We've talked about the dams, PPPs, the farmer. How does a local farmer next to these dams, next to these projects, how do they plug in? How will they benefit? How can they plan that 6 years from now I'm near what dam, I'm going to get this water? How do I plug in?
Yeah. So what you're doing, we have what we call outgrowers. Most of these large-scale producers, they have what we call, you have the nexus. Nexus is where he'll set up his mill. Let's take, for example, Bura. Let's say a place like Bura, which is a very practical example. Bura, we have the Bura irrigation scheme, and in there we don't have a dam, but Bura has a potential of 176,000 acres. But with the normal flow of the canal that was finished the other day, we are able to put 25,000 acres into production. An additional 25,000 acres, 25. Right now we have 5,000 acres under production, and we are able to put another 20,000 acres under production. So a case example is when we have a large scale producer who comes on board, he sets up the milling plant, he sets up all the equipment needed for production. Then he also goes ahead and does his own production. But also they embrace what we call outgrowers. Now, the outgrowers model is where the local farmer is able to be trained on what is needed, and because the local farmer at times may not have the capacity to do processing, may not have the capacity to do the marketing, then this person now creates him, sets up the plant, shows them how to go about production in terms of quality, in terms of the seeds, and some of them will go ahead and give you money for inputs. Because for you to be able to have quality for export, for us, so that the farmer can benefit, you need to use the right quality of seed, the right inputs, and the right farming method. So some of these investors, because they have an intention, whereby you find 25% they produce internally, 75% they get from the outgrowers. So our local farmers along those dams, they are going to be very big beneficiaries.
So it's going to be primarily a big industrial complex, and then the farmers, whether it's maize, it's rice, it's sugarcane, it's whatever, they'll be feeding into this system. So they have to be contracted by these big producers.
Yeah. So it will be more like a contract farming or of some sort. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah.
A lot of these things that we've spoken about today are future there are things that will come in 2026, 2027, whereby plans have been done, whereby, we've looked at the state of things and said, okay, this is happening. What's happening today with the state of irrigation, whereby farmers that Mark mentions are benefiting today because of things that have been implemented to make sure that agriculture actually then can hold up the economy, which we've already said it has many times? What is happening today that people can say, actually, you know what, here it is, has been done, and as a result of this is what we're yielding? Or is all of this aspirational? It's futuristic, and we'll say that these things will be done later. But what about today?
Okay, I'll start with the Loanzoia, which I said water is started to flowing by gravity. And I mean water is flowing by gravity, we mean that there is no cost of pumping. Loanzoia, I would say, is more like an extension of the old Bunyala scheme. But now we've expanded it. That's why you find the old Bunyala scheme was actually in Busia. And it was tapping water from the same river, the Loanzoia River, but by virtue of pumping. The farmers were incurring a cost of pumping. Initially, it was diesel. It was changed from diesel now to electricity. Mm-hmm. So the farmers of Bunyala scheme were actually pumping water. And so that means there was a cost as farmers, as a scheme, they were coming together and incurring a cost of operational maintenance, which was going to pumping. But now, with the flow of water, now when the Loanzoia now has been taken upstream, that's why it is now touches on Siaya, and it has been connected to the old Bunyala scheme. So very soon, His Excellency the President will be coming to decommission, officially, to decommission the old Bunyala scheme. So that means the farmers of Bunyala today, they're actually benefiting by virtue of the fact that the cost of production has gone down because they no longer have to pay for the cost of pumping. That's one. Then we have a place like Ruafura. Ruafura is here in Kiambu. We just commissioned a project. People have been, but then in Loanzoia, on the Bunyala, they are benefiting immediately. On the upper side of Siaya, who have not been using irrigation, now they are very happy that they've seen water. They used to see canals. They never, but now they have hope. They've seen water, and we're working very well with the county government of Siaya towards capacity building them and helping them. We also set up a pilot plant for them to see how production is going to be done. And right now, they've also formed what we call irrigation water use associations, which is in blocks, and they are on how to manage the water, and also we've brought them together under cooperative. Also to help them in future marketing, but that's the future again. Now coming to Ruafura, as we talk right now, we've also worked closely with the Trade Department, State Department of Trade, who have recently signed very many MOUs, including the one we have in AU. But how are the farmers benefiting from that? We've gotten an off-taker. Mm-hmm. This off-taker has come and set up camp and set up a pilot plant. So farmers now are actually getting the right seeds for export. So meaning the Ruafura farmer may not have understood the agreement signed between Kenya government and the European Union, but they're going to be the first beneficiaries. Mm-hmm. Most of them are saying from half an acre, they're able to get almost 1 million from that projection. So those are some of the examples I can give of the exact benefit that the farmers are getting now.
We're looking forward to what the future will bring because it is a big deal, and of course there are many whose future is hinged on all of that. CPA Fantas Kimotho, who is the Principal Secretary in the State Department for Irrigation in the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, has been our guest this hour. Thank you for being here. We look forward to talking again in the future. Asante Sana.